Digital audio health by Cymatrax.
Welcome to the Rhonda Grant Show with your host, Rhonda Grant. If you believe that there is more to life than what you see right now, and you want to find out more, listen in as her guests share their journey and their extraordinary experiences. Now, here is your host, Rhonda Grant.
Welcome to the Rhonda Grant Show. Sometimes the universe has a way of placing people or obstacles in your path to help guide and direct you on your mission. Listen in as we discover the path my guest has traveled. Has he been inspired by a calling, crafted his journey, or a bit of both? I invite you to embrace the conversation and to use them to help you to recognize if this is happening in your life. Our guest today is Dan Goodwin, who is founder of CYA, Cover Your Assets, who provides business, advisory, and consultancy services, primarily for businesses as they prepare for scale-up opportunities. Welcome to the Rhonda Grant Show, Dan.
Hi, Rhonda. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. It's such a pleasure to interview you on my podcast. We've known each other for a little bit, right?
Well, I was just thinking about, I know it's been over a year and maybe pushing 2 years because we met during the craziness in the last half of the summer, I believe, of 2020.
Yes, that's right. We did. Can you tell us the people who influenced your journey to success?
Absolutely. I'm going to give a shout out and credit to my 7th grade music teacher. Music has always been a part of my life. And my dad said I was an active child, whatever that means. That's air quotes around active. So I was kind of starting to hang out with the wrong crowd when I got to junior high. And my music teacher, I don't know if she felt she had a mission or if she just saw somebody that was flailing a little bit. And she was able to take my musical skills up to that point and really start applying them into different aspects of music and performance, and starting in junior high. And I give her a lot of credit for putting up with a smart aleck 13-year-old. And let's see. After that, there was a minister and his wife that I did lawn work for, that I was introduced to by my future wife. Mm-hmm. And it opened my eyes up to maybe there was more to the universe and to religion other than what I was raised in. So that would be number 2. And then number 3, I had a great mentor when I was in my corporate job that took a young whippersnapper and showed him the ropes on how you navigate successfully in a corporate environment and politically in a corporate environment. So those are the top 3 that come to my mind.
So was success easy for you to attain?
Well, no. The short answer is no.
Because people think that when they hear about a successful person, that it's been easy for them. They may not know the obstacles that you've had to face along the way.
I would say definitely 90% of what you see on a person's journey hasn't been revealed. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. That ought to be a song, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I was thinking that.
So, well, here's what I mean. Let's take social media. Let's look at LinkedIn. Let's look at Facebook. Let's look at Instagram for sure. All that is shared are the success stories, and that's the 10% journey, right? So Billy Ray Cyrus, remember him?
Mm-hmm.
achy breaky heart way back in the day, maker of the mullet, right? He made a statement one time that I just absolutely glommed onto. And that was, uh, I loved it when people came up and said, what an overnight success you are.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, they haven't seen me the last 15 years playing in dive bars, getting bottles thrown at me, being behind the chicken wire up on stage. So, and of course, that was he did a lot more things after that, but that was kind of his breakthrough to stardom, was achy breaky heart. How's that for a throwback, Rhonda?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. And I mean, you're absolutely right. People see the person arriving as successful, and they don't realize the failures along the way, the triumphs along the way, to the person that you are today. And sometimes when people see success, they don't see it as attainable from where they're sitting right now. Like, that person's so successful, I could never do that. I don't even know how to start. What 3 important things did you find in business that helped you towards your success?
The top 3 things. One was persistence, even to the annoyance of others sometimes, to be really focused. Rhonda, I was ADHD before it was diagnosable or cool.
Oh.
so that's how old I am. And so the persistence thing is, let's keep going until I think there's a difference between hitting a closed door and smashing through it, and the wisdom comes from knowing if it's worth the smash or not, because that persistence part is what really makes the difference. So I would say the first thing would be persistence. That would be lesson 1. The second one would be grace, to not to be as hard on yourself. And also grace, the second part of that would be give others a break. We are all traveling down this road of life, doing the best we can and working through our traumas, intentional or unintentional, it doesn't matter, because we have to remember our parents were also doing the best they could with the information they had in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told my kids this. There are things that I do regret. However, they have to work through them themselves, just like I had to work through mine. So that generational thing. So persistence and grace. And then the last one is love. And in fact, I have a phrase that I'll put on the end of my post sometimes: practice grace, mercy, and love whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes people won't really allow you to practice that openly, and sometimes there's that toxic relationship that you just have to let it go. So that would be it: persistence, grace, and love. I guess that's the 3 lessons I would promote today.
Mm-hmm. You said something there, with parents who raise children, and we all make mistakes when we raise children, but we also do a lot of really great things for our kids. There's some children who become adults that have a hard time forgiving their parents for their mistakes, because they don't understand that they were operating at the level of consciousness that they had at that time. Right? So how would you advise people right now who were struggling with that and needed to overcome that?
Number 1, stay in curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
When you have those issues that were trauma inducing, especially below the age of 10, that can imprint the rest of your life if you allow that to. I've had conversations with my dad. He had a stroke about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, cognitive abilities were fine. He was more affected physically. And there have been questions that I had and say, why did this happen? And I had to really rephrase that, not coming on gangbusters.
Yeah.
And say, Dad, do you remember the time that this happened? I'm just trying to remember, because I want him to remember. And if he doesn't remember, there's no use moving forward with the question. If he does remember, do you remember what was going on during that time? So you really have to approach it. You don't have to soft shoe it all the time, but you really need to be honoring and as respectful as you can without getting and dipping into the emotion surrounding that situation that maybe you're still hurting from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good advice. Really good advice. How does your critical thinking apply outside the boardroom, sort of thing?
Wow. This is, and Rhonda, you know me, this is a passion of mine, is to raise the critical thinking levels for people. If anything, the last 2.5 years has proven to the world is people have abdicated their critical thinking skills. And we know that when you abdicate your critical thinking skills, you are by default allowing external messaging become your reality. So the critical thinking part dives in. My favorite pattern interrupt question, and I think I've talked to you about this before, is when somebody comes at you with a deeply held belief or position, to take a step back and say, well, Rhonda, I'm curious. How would you know if that wasn't true? Because when we automatically assume what we hear is true, nothing good can come from that ultimately, because you're allowing that piece to become how you feel. And there's lots of talks today about feelings and emotions and drama and trauma. And the physiological part of that is our amygdala gets hijacked. And the cortisol and the adrenaline is dumping into our brain 24/7. And we know that there's a minimum of 30 minutes for the physiological, for the balance, the chemical balance to return so that we have reasoning skills. So when you have external forces like social media and mainstream media and family, friends, and church and whatever other factors, when you allow that messaging to become your default messaging, you're not practicing your critical thinking skills.
That's a lot to process. It sounded very easy when you're talking about that, but that's a difficult process to grasp onto. And you're right. I mean, negativity and feeling negative dumps a lot of bad chemicals into your system, which causes disease. And joyfulness and gratefulness dumps another set of chemicals, which is life preserving. And a lot of people don't know that because they don't recognize how their speech affects their present state of mind because they've been using it for so long. What are some of the things that people can do to help themselves be more critical?
Wow. Here's what I know. people ask questions for primarily two reasons.
Okay.
And the first reason they ask a question, Rhonda, is to affirm a deeply held belief or position. So, so the listeners can't see this, but you can. This shirt makes me look awesome, right?
Yes, it does,
right.
Dan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So, no, so, what am I doing there? I'm fishing for affirmation. I'm fishing for the compliment.
Okay.
And I want agreement. And people want agreement when they ask a question. And the second reason people ask questions is they are genuinely curious and they're seeking new data points. They really want to know something. I'm an eternally curious person. I was that young boy that was, go sit down, shut up, boy. You're asking too many questions. So I was always asking, always into something, right? And I've had a son the same way, and I've got a grandson the same way. And now here's the flip side of this. The reason people don't ask questions, and this is going to answer your question. The reason people don't ask questions is they don't seek new data points, because if they discover a new data point, they have to then process that, and they either have to take action or inaction, and there are consequences attached. And consequences are agnostic in this point. There can be good or bad if you choose to take action. There can be good or bad if you choose to ignore something. So that's the first step, and it's just easier to not ask questions that seek data points. And then adding on to that, if they go back and share their newfound revelation with their friends, family, social group, church, whatever, just pick a group, and it's not within the group think of what those people ascribe to, then they can get, discouraged. They can get excommunicated. They can get ridiculed, and they simply don't want to go through the emotional pain. So therefore, i.e., it's just easier to get along, and let your programming of how you think about things default to externals.
So if that's what a person chooses to do, can that person become successful?
Here's what I've noticed on my own journey, because I can't travel your journey or my wife's journey or my brother's journey. I can only say what is my journey.
Exactly.
As the flip side of the last 2.5 years is people are waking up, and they're discovering that, oh, okay, is this how I really think about it? Take any of the subjects that we can talk about: vaccines, masks, gun control, abortion, politics. It doesn't matter, because the divisive piece of it is what triggers the awakening. So that's the blessing in disguise. Here's what I found. As I have grown on my journey, my awakening, my spiritual journey, the people sense, they intuitively know that something has changed, that you have changed somehow. And two things will happen. Either people will lean into that and say, hey, Dan, what's going on? Or they'll say, what do you think about this? Or what are your thoughts? Or they're going to look at you and perceive you as a threat to their equilibrium. And they're actually going to start drifting away. And that can be friends, that can be family members. It doesn't really matter. And when I say drift away, I'm not saying breaking fellowship forever. I'm not saying that, but they're suddenly not going to have the time to hang out. And they're certainly wanting to keep the conversations at a superficial level, because I can drop truth bombs on them and I know which ones will land. And from my investigative background, I know how to lob those into with language so that it really wakes that person up when they have to process it, and it makes them very uncomfortable sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I love when you brought up your investigative background, and I do want to talk about that. Do you find that what people are recognizing in you or others who have come into an enlightenment or awakening, that when they see your light, they realize that maybe they're not shining from that part?
Yes, it's very disconcerting at the least and very upsetting at the most that you've gone this many years and just now are coming into an understanding of whatever that journey means to you. And not diving too deep, I was raised in a very evangelical conservative church,
Mm-hmm.
and the things, and that was one of the times that I kept getting told to sit down and shut up, because
Yeah.
I was listening, I was drawing pictures on the pew during the sermon, but I had one ear open, right? And I was always questioning, I don't think that's what the scripture actually said. Did it, Dad? One of those things. I was one of those kids, right? I was just a joy to be with. But I think when you're, and I always joke with people and say, our church was not a cult because we only hit 8 out of the 10 characteristics of a cult, but we were pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as I have walked my journey, I turn around and look at the people that I went to church with when I was a kid and young adult. And again, you are better served by saying, bless God, they did the best they could in their present moment with the information that they ascribed themselves to.
Mm-hmm.
It is not my job to go back and try to change them, tell them that they were going down the wrong path. My job is to love them and be attractive to them, that if they are open to it, I'm ready to talk.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. That's just wonderful. Talk to us about this investigative work that you do.
Sure. So my life has been divided into 2 parts, corporate
Mm-hmm.
and then consulting, entrepreneur and consulting. So when I was at the Fortune 50 company that I was at, I was sent to a school in Chicago, and which is the school they send detectives and inspectors and investigators and
Wow.
to learn interview techniques. And that's really where I cut my teeth on learning, how to interview skills and a little bit of sales, a little bit of psychology, and a lot of NLP.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know what neuro-linguistic programming was when I went to school way back in the mid-90s. However,
It's very
that's
effective.
what they were, that's what they were teaching us to do. And, I learned, how to ask great questions and thought-provoking and pattern interrupts and, how to raise and lower cognitive dissonance within people by the questions that you asked, and how to get into rapport quickly with people so that they're seen and heard and validated. And I was very good at what I did. I always uncovered three or 4 additional management issues that they had to clean up after we got through dealing with the security issues.
Oh.
So that piece of it, hundreds of investigations and thousands of interviews, and, learning how to gauge truthful and deceptive behaviors and verbal and nonverbal. All of that training came to the fore because that's what I was hired to do. So when I finally was burnt out on travel and dealing with people's mistakes and bad judgment is when I decided to leave. And then I went a totally different direction, tried to get away from investigations. And then I had family and friends that had small businesses. And guess what? They had similar issues. And I got pulled back in. And I found myself starting to help people, first of all, for free. And then I said, you know what? I think I can monetize this. And I can control my travel and my hours at this point.
Wonderful. You're listening to the Rhonda Grant Show, whose podcast has been treated with digital audio health by my sponsor, Cymatrax. And today I'm speaking with Dan Goodwin from CYA Consulting. How may people reach out to you, Dan?
Thanks for asking, Rhonda. So my playground is LinkedIn. So I am not a secret agent anymore. They can find me there. So CYA, by the way, I don't think we ever defined CYA stands for cover your assets, in case your listeners were kind of curious about where that was going. So.
Wonderful. Yes, I love that. What a great acronym. Cover your assets.
Yeah, it's another pattern interrupt, Rhonda. That's why I chose it. So gets people's attention and brings a smile to their face a lot of the time.
Yes. Do you feel that you've been called to your journey, or have you crafted your journey?
I think the first part of my life, the journey was crafted, sometimes by default, sometimes me not really knowing as a young man what I wanted to do. I had a lot of things I could have done. I had multiple talents, performance art, music was huge, theater was huge. And then I got married, right? And then it's like, okay, time for real life. And, I started in the mailroom and did that. And then the assistant's job, and then the investigator's job, then the regional manager. I finished up as a regional manager for 5 states here in the Midwest. So that part, I would say, crafted. And then trying to get out of that is kind of where I felt the calling piece of it, as I started helping people deal with their own bad situations and helping them find a solution and a path to fix what was broken. And then, of course, the last 2.5 years, I feel like it is a real calling to help people process the journeys that they're going through with all of the different inputs, physical and emotional, that they're going through as we deal with how the world is evolving.
And do you find that the pandemic has really affected a lot of businesses?
Absolutely. I think so. When everything first kind of broke down, April, May, June, the conversations I was having with my consulting clients is, if you have remote workers, you need to be checking in on them, and not checking in on them on work. You need to check on them with their mental health. And everybody, the dogs and the cats, walking out across keyboards, and kids jumping in, not knowing dad or mom was on the Zoom, half-dressed spouses walking through, forgetting that there was a camera in the room. I mean, we saw all the amusements, right? But at the same time, I would tell my people, be a human first, be a boss second. Find out, make sure, do they have everything they need? Is everybody healthy? This was not a time to go draconian and do keystroke logging and screen monitoring and all that. We need to be human first, and then work together to get the productions up. That was my first experience in the pandemic.
And did you find that some people thrived under these conditions, and then there's other people that really needed their co-workers and that office setting in order for them to thrive.
Right. So in general terms, the introverts loved it. They
Yeah.
could stay home, right?
I know.
They could stay home, leave me alone, or just let me get my work done.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
And then, of course, the extroverts are like, when is the next party? I want to get out of this house no matter what.
I know.
So
When are the bars going to open again, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember that. And you know, I was one that's like, get me out of this house. My wife's a school teacher, and of course she came home March the 13th, and you know, never went back that year.
Mm-hmm.
So we had an adjustment because I work from home, and you know, I had to basically move her side of the office up to a spare bedroom because she says I talk too loud. Can you believe that? But yeah, the whole thing with employees and clients it was amazing to me as it drug on. Here's another reason that people wanted to go back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
It was avoidance. It was avoiding having to deal with the issues that came from being at home with the family or the spouse.
Oh, yes.
And they needed the air quotes here for the listeners. They needed a break, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of divorces during that time because people, when they're spending all that time together, may realize that they don't like their spouse. And it's okay coming home at night and going back to work in the morning and spending the weekends together, but all day, every day, day in and day out, people made different decisions for their lives during that time.
Yes. And with the risk of sounding sexist, my experience with my clients were that the males had more of their identity wrapped in their job. Some of the females did too, but proportionally, it was the males. And when they couldn't go out to quote unquote strut their stuff and show off in the office and how good they were on sales and how knowledgeable and intelligent they were, when they didn't have an audience to play to, and the only audience was a spouse who really knew who they were, then it wasn't quite as fun. So anyway, that could be a whole stand-up routine, I guess, right?
Yeah, they weren't having as much fun as they used to. Well, you're not being stroked, right? And people like to feel appreciated for what they do. What extraordinary discovery have you found in your life?
That at my current level in life, I wish I would have been open enough 20 years ago to know what I know now. And the reason is I was 20 years ago one of those fast trackers in a corporate environment. And I wasn't quite burnout yet. I was getting close.
Right.
But I really felt that I knew it all. And the adage is true. The older you get, the less you know. And that piece of it, I guess, is the lesson learned. That now, with the next 5 to 7 years to work and leave my legacy, my job is to help people avoid my mistakes and learn faster than I did. Now, and we know that some people will insist on making their own mistakes. So can't help them all.
No, that's right. People don't want you to tell them because they want to do it their way, not realizing that their way might be a really rough line that they're going to travel. What Do you remember the point in your life when you felt that you had come into an awakening or an enlightenment? Because there's very, very many different levels of enlightenment. Do you remember the moment or
I don't
anything
know if
that
there was
okay.
a moment. There was a time period. So
A time
back
period?
in May,
Perfect.
yeah, yeah, back in May of 2014, I had an NDE, and I don't share this with everybody. I guess it's just between you and me and your 1,000 listeners, your 100,000 people that are on the podcast.
Yeah.
But
So do you want to tell the listeners what those initials mean? Because a lot of people may not know.
oh, sure, yeah. See, that's we assume sometimes people already know what we know. So NDE is near death experience,
Yes.
and so this whole time period, back in April of 14, I started having a detached retina in my right eye.
Ooh.
And I was very unhealthy. I was about 30 pounds heavier than I am now. And so I had 5 laser surgeries. And finally, it started to curtain, which means the retina was actually starting to peel off the back of the eye. So those 5 lasers didn't cut it. So that led to an emergency surgery, rushing me into emergency surgery. And I told the anesthesiologist on the way into the room, the operating room, I said, listen, I've got sleep apnea, so you need to have oxygen standing by.
Right.
And he didn't listen. So halfway through the surgery, I woke up. They were stripping the sedative IV out of my left arm and putting a steroid IV in my right arm. I bottomed out. They were charging the paddles when I came back, so I didn't ever have to get a shock, but scared my doctor to death. He used some very colorful language the next day when I went for my follow-up. And, people said, well, did you go to the other side? I said, yeah. And he told me to come back and take care of you. You need help. So I was being a smart aleck about it. And, but it really fundamentally, that trauma of all of that changed my personality. And my wife and my kids bore the brunt of that. And I became a lot more focused. I became a lot more closed-throated, not offering opinion unless somebody asked for it or was paying me to give an opinion. Because Rhonda, I was the type of guy, I like to push people's buttons. It was free entertainment for me. I know what their trigger points were.
Right.
And, I would just agitate. And I lost interest in doing that. So that would have been 14, 15. And then the last 2 years is really where I started researching vibration and frequency, and really where I see my own spiritual journey that is mine alone versus a religious journey. Religion is imperfect man's attempt to explain our relationship with God, creator, universe, whatever label you want to use. Spirituality is my journey and how I see myself within that universe. So here we go. Now we've gone down a deep rabbit hole, Rhonda.
Beautiful. This is where I would, I'm always surprised with where conversations can go. And I really appreciate that you have shared that. Many people have had near-death experiences. I'm one of them. And unless it happens to you, you don't understand the moments that happen after that, how space is different, how reality is different. And you just come into an awareness that is not like anything that you experienced before. And it changes you. We don't recommend it to people. We're not recommending this at all. But It is a difference. And people can come into awakening by meditating every single morning, or at least sometimes during the day. Give you some alternatives here of how you can reach awakening. But for some of us, that near-death experience changes everything.
Absolutely. It's an impact point. I would say out of that, the empathy piece and the intuition piece got way deeper.
Oh, yeah.
And I was already an intuitive person, which made me successful in my investigative career.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to read energy, read body language, read breathing, read all of that. And what I find now is the younger me before 2014,
Mm-hmm.
I was always looking to, let's go out, honey. Let's go to this restaurant. Let's meet so-and-so over here.
Yes.
And now the empathy piece, I need recharge time for me after spending time with people,
Mm-hmm.
because I absorb that at such a higher level now than I did before 2014.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. You feel it. You feel the energy. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Rhonda Grant Show. I've really enjoyed learning more about you. And so thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you, Rhonda. It's been an honor and a privilege to visit with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Theme song for the Rhonda Grant Show, Sun on the Water, is composed and performed by my friend John Park Wheeler. This is Rhonda Grant with the Rhonda Grant Show, author of Magical Forces Within, Extraordinary Discoveries in an Ordinary Life, inviting you to look for the magical forces within yourself today and every day. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rhonda Grant Show with your host, Rhonda Grant. If you would like to find out more information about Rhonda and her upcoming guests and the work that she does, go to her website, rhondagrantauthor.com. That's rhondagrantauthor.com.
Digital audio health by Cymatrax.